Okay, well, welcome to our latest edition of Tecman Talks Dynamics. We're in a unique position, I think, today that the four of us are in the same room to record the same podcast.
And non-socially distanced.
And non-socially, well, the restrictions are down, aren't they? So we can get together and do this in a more informal way.
We're all double jabbed.
Yes.
Yep. That shows everything about our age, doesn't it? But there we go. But I think it's one of those topics that it doesn't seem 5 minutes since we were talking about the Wave 1 release back at the beginning of the year, and here we are now coming to the end of the summer, and we're talking about what's going to come in the October or Wave 2 release of Business Central. Microsoft announced that a couple of weeks ago. I think we've had a quick, I won't going to say we've digested it, but we've had a quick browse through some of the highlights and looked at a few in more details. So I know, James, you've got a list of the key areas. Is there anything that stands out, or anything you want to cover first?
There's loads of stuff that stands out. I mean, and the other thing is this list is not static. It seems to grow occasionally as they slot something else in as it comes through.
Sometimes you find stuff that
release.
isn't even on the list.
Yeah, so you definitely need to keep an eye on it as we go up to kind of October the 1st and the release comes out. But I mean, there's some nice additions in there. There's some finishing off pieces as well. So definitely good. I think I have to start off with the bank and payment reconciliation improvements. That's been on the list for the 6th time.
Somebody's campaigning really hard.
Somebody really wants to get that right, don't they? But it does seem to be getting progressively better.
Yeah, I mean, the Wave 1 statement import, that wizard works really well.
Yes. So you can finally point it at your ASCII file and it kind of chops it up correctly and brings it in. So it definitely benefit, but interesting to see that they're going again on that. What's next? Default line type on sales and purchase documents. I mean, really simple, but every new user goes in there, misses it out, tries to type a item number in the number field and wonders why it won't come up. So again, it's
but it helps with speed of entry,
simple.
Doesn't it?
Yep.
We just get those orders on faster.
What else? Somebody got one to pick?
Finally, some additional columns on get receipt and get shipment lines, purchase order for matching purposes, something that we do for nearly every customer, so that when you go to match purchase invoices, you can see the original purchase order number.
External document number as
well. Document number.
That extension or customization, another one that can go in the bin. Yeah.
I think there's some talking of additional fields and columns. Quite a big one, I think. Description 2 and name 2 is across the board now. So a lot of customers probably don't even know what they are because they're hidden by default. But it's been there since day one. Every customer name has a name 2. Every item has a description 2. And it's already on the tables in the background. They just never put it on the pages. So finally that's there. So
you put an external document number as well now on a journal, general journal or recurring journal.
Yeah.
And so, if you had to go through and do all the personalizations, it was a pain in the backside because it was a lot of pages to do that on. So that it's there by default, I think is,
And it's, one thing to remember, it's probably not on any of the reports. So just bear that in mind.
Although, more report news later.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Variants getting some love. So item variant code on demand forecast. Not that many customers will use that, but the ones who need it, it's very useful for.
Well, I think before we've come across the problem where you suggest using variants and it hasn't gone all the way through.
Yeah.
We're just getting these small incremental changes now in this area and lots of other areas where these things will then go all the way through. So if you're going to use them, you can use them properly.
Finishing
and you haven't got to have a load of development to do that final bit to make it really usable.
And linking to that, you've also got the stock keeping units. So in Wave 1, we had the production BOM and routing entered on there, but it didn't work with planning. So bit of a half a job.
Yeah, exactly.
So that now is going to be included into the planning calculations. So yeah, brilliant.
I think that's pretty huge because that means you can have a different route per location. So if you manufacture the same thing in multiple places, very rarely do you have the same machines or the same routing, same work centres, machine centres. So you can now, that was a frequent customization as well. That's another one that's gone in a bin. So yeah, really good. And variants, I think variants are going to be used a lot more in the future because you've got that possibility to use it. You won't have to use item tracking quite so much. And actually it works better because it goes through planning.
Maybe next one for the list for the next release is having variants to be mandatory. So if you are using them, you have to stipulate it.
That's really annoying, isn't it?
That'd be another extension we could throw in. But
it is. The minute you don't have it, that all the information just becomes useless because it's, you just.
And how do you even know, that you should have it?
Yeah,
it needs to be.
Yeah, and actually, if you've got variants, then to not have a variant probably wouldn't make sense, would it? So it just makes sense. So. You can now add non-inventory items onto requisition worksheets and planning worksheets. So non-inventory items has been there a while, but not many people use it. I still think, but lots of people still use things like GL lines.
Well, what was it? 2016 it came in.
Yeah. But I suppose the nice thing about them is, especially if you're doing things like back-to-back orders or special orders, you can get it all to put the whole order to pull through now rather than just
and consumable items. I tend to use.
But I think if we went and asked all of our customers, there's a lot of people still use GL lines for those kinds of things because that used to be the only option. So and you've got the type as well, haven't you now as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things I'd still like to see. Automatic shipment of non-inventory items when the first shipment is posted, so that if you use it for a delivery charge or something like that, it just goes through. Again, we've got a whole library of extensions that we use again and again, and sooner or later, Microsoft, I guess, will catch up with that. But it's a start. I'd also like to see a proper requisition form. Rather than, requisition worksheet, it's great for purchasing, but how do I go and say I need a desk or I need a part for a machine and I don't know who I'm going to buy it from or the price I'm going to buy it. I just want purchasing to go get for me.
As a team member as well, from a licensing perspective.
Yes, because that's always been a bit of a showstopper, hasn't it, for people when it comes to putting in purchase ordering systems, that had to have a licensed full user for them just to be able to input a purchase order.
Really, it's only the purchasing team that should raise a purchase order, isn't it? The rest should raise a requisition, I think. That's what you want. So, that would be a simple extra couple of pages that would really boost the functionality. But hopefully it's on ideas somewhere and getting votes.
Delegated admin on a job queue. So it doesn't have to be the same user. You can have that running with the job queue running with a different user. I think that was your request, wasn't it?
Yeah, so this has been a conundrum for a while in that support team can't, your partner's support team can't start a job queue because it was considered by Microsoft a security hole that you could effectively start a job queue that executed a bomb 3 months later or 6 months later. So it had to be a user in the organisation that started a job queue. But the problem is they'd start it and then it wouldn't execute properly. So it would stop again. And so it would be back to support to try another permutation till it got and it ran properly. So the idea that I came up with was to ask them if they could get it so it would execute once. And so you could prove that it works. And then when it's correctly working, you could ask the users to go start it on a perpetual basis, and they've delivered that. So do
we know that's in this release? That is what's happening. Can you do it once? Is it, or do we not? Have we not got down to that level of detail? You saying?
We haven't tried it because obviously this is all in preview, Liam. But you can't try any of it.
No. I didn't know if the details in there were.
I believe from the discussions that I've seen, and there was some discussion on one of the MVP calls about what was coming. I believe that's what they plan on doing. So that's great.
I'm just going to mention the removal of obsolete reports 204, 205, 206 and 207. Some people might look at that and panic because that's sales order, sales invoice, and they might think, they're not obsolete, I still need those. They've moved over to word layouts for the standard documents. They'll remove those obsolete ones. If you've got bespoke versions of those, then they'll be in a different number. So removal of those reports won't affect people.
Yes.
So they're just then sitting there in
It's
the
just a
background
tidy
as
up
obsolete.
exercise, which is good.
It doesn't mean that there is no longer a sales invoice or a sales order.
No, and I think the GB local versions
They're
are still
different
there.
anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, they're different, but they're still there, aren't they? So
I don't know.
I think they are. I'm sure they were last time I looked.
That'll be on the next. That'll be on the next one. Yeah. Remove those obsolete reports.
List of trusted partner apps. So this is quite a new concept that you can, I guess, whitelist a set of apps. The partner can whitelist a set of apps to allow installation into a tenant, rather than people just going and picking something from
Yeah,
apps.
and I think as a user, it's a bit of a minefield, isn't it? You've got no clue who the partners are behind them, what their pedigree is, what the quality of the app is. So to be able to have a reduced list of ones that maybe are tried and tested more is quite useful for the customer. Otherwise, it can be a little bit overwhelming, I think, when you go in there and you think,
Yeah, I don't. Again, I haven't looked at the details. Does anyone know? Is that coming into the tenant, or would it be into a live database that you might have that, but you could put what you wanted into maybe the test area and give it a try?
I don't know.
I don't think it stops you.
restrictions.
I don't think it stops you just because it's not. It
just gives you a list to give.
It's
Okay, so the partner just allows you to say,
yeah.
go try these before you go looking for something else.
Yeah,
That's the way I read it.
yeah. You still go and install what you like at your own risk.
But the customers will go and find something themselves though, and I've had this before where they've gone along and installed something in their sandbox and say, "What do you think of this app?" And it's like, "Oh, that's new. That's really good. Yeah, let's go and find out about it, and then we'll go."
Yeah, and we can share that with others, can't we? And on the other hand, as well, someone else might install something and go, "Actually, this doesn't quite do what I expected." So we can share that.
All of a sudden, I can't ship in the warehouse.
Nothing works.
But I guess the removal of extensions, that's the other thing with that, isn't it? Once you put an app in, it's so easy these days to take something out.
Yeah.
You're not left with that horrible feeling that we need someone to untangle the mess we've just created.
Yeah.
Well, yes, although you still have to be aware that, if it can do a lot of mess to your data while it's in there. So the fact that you've taken the app out doesn't put the data right. It does need a little bit of care. So, unsurprisingly, enhancements to Microsoft Teams integration.
I've had a look at that. There wasn't a huge amount. I think you're going to get a new button on the web client and the Business Central app that will allow you to push directly to Teams, and now you can choose, because it mainly used to go into chat from I think the Wave 1 release. Now you can choose whether it goes into a team, a chat, or any other area of Teams. So it's that level of integration. So it's just basically pushing data. Although I think Business Central people can still obviously then use that data to view it. They can't do anything with it. Yeah. So you can push data around from BC around the rest of the organisation if you use Teams.
Okay.
It's useful sometimes to send the right link. Lots of people are kind of pasting kind of item numbers or customer numbers and so on in there. So it does speed up productivity for them to just be able to click on it and open it when they get it, rather than having to.
Yeah, and I think once you get
you didn't find it,
like all the stuff with the Power Apps and everything that you can push data through, if one of the actions of that is that this item or something gets pushed through onto Teams, into a certain team channel, if it was, I don't know, a complaint, and you wanted that, there was an issue with this item, and automatically gets thrown into the customer services team, and they might not have access to Business Central, but they can see exactly what the record was. You can see the data flowing around in that format, and that might be useful. But
I think the Teams will really come into its own when workflow hits Teams. So you go into Teams and it tells you need to do this, and this is outstanding, or this has happened, and so on. So I think that's what I'm waiting for in terms of where they go. Obviously, we've got more improvements to Power Automate integration, and some of the missing APIs have been filled in with this release from what I can see. So I think we're getting closer and closer, but the day that the Power Automate integrations and pre-built flows are equivalent to the inbuilt workflow, and they can take the inbuilt workflows out and just rely on Power Automate. I think that, in combination with Teams, will be awesome. But we're probably 2 or 3 releases away from that, maybe.
I think that, the templated Power Automates for BC, it's pretty well much all of your internal BC workflow
equivalents.
They're all listed there. So you've got all your document approvals and customer, vendor, item approval, journal approval, and you just choose the template and it creates it all. You just have to fill in the company numbers, but then because it's then in Power Automate, you can then go expand it and put some more logic in there. So I actually think I don't see why you would use the internal workflows rather than Power Automate now.
So would you be happy, Matt, if they took the internal workflows out?
Yeah.
Actually, it's confusing.
Yeah.
The matter by having them in.
I mean, it does rely on most of the functionality. So
just take the pages out.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting point of view. What else have we got? Features.
Little one, rounding on if you're using alternate units of measure. So I've got pieces in a box and I book in 5 instead of 6 pieces. I don't want 4.8877 of a box. I might want it to round up to 1.
Okay.
So that's features coming in which can be useful.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you get
stupid.
Yeah.
Lots of decimal numbers on your base unit of measure.
Yeah.
Some more education, isn't there, with these app tours? Again, I haven't seen what they look like. It'd be interesting, but I know other competitors' products do that quite well. So if you're new to the product and you want to go through a learning process, I know it's not
click here
and push you around. If they follow that type of format, it'll be.
There's a push to make things simpler and to make things easier to use alongside the videos as well, because you've got some changes to dimensions and posting groups. With lots of people find really confusing when they set up if they need to change. There's some changes around there to try and make it a little bit easy to set up and to what's the word that they use?
Improved user experience, is it?
It basically says improved user experience to stop it going wrong, which is quite a big statement. I'll be interested to see how they can completely stop it going wrong, but they've obviously looked at areas where maybe people have struggled to understand how it all fits together in the past, or where it does go wrong and you've got things posted into the wrong place with the wrong dimensions, and tried to simplify that. So I think there is a push towards simplification and
It's always one of their high level goals. Every time you see what's coming in down the future, it says simplification, and so you never end doing that, do you?
Maybe one day Clippy will come back with this then.
Clippy has made some return on the office. He's a new emoji now.
Hey, it looks like you're trying to post some dimensions which don't look right.
For younger listeners of the podcast, Clippy was something that happened in 1997.
I was going to say,
Showing your age.
Some admin stuff, which I think is cool. Admin of the organisation can decide up front which users or user groups get the Excel and Outlook add-ins. So, and it'll
central deployment.
Yeah, and it'll auto deploy.
Nice.
So that takes away a headache especially on prem. The other one I like as well is copying environments. So on SaaS you can copy production to a sandbox, and that's the only way you can go. Now you're going to be able to copy sandbox to production, sandbox to sandbox, production to production. So if you've got multiple production environments, or as you're implementing the system, perhaps you've done something in sandbox, you want to say, right, we want to now move this into production. Mm-hmm. So a bit more flexibility there.
Yeah.
There's a license cost to having more than one production.
There is, yeah. You only have one production out of the box.
And 3 sandboxes. So I think it's great. I think this, on the initial implementation, that's really useful to be able to test everything in the sandbox. Then when you're happy, push it to production.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And another one which I think the support team will love is being able to restart an environment.
Yeah, I hope that's not. I hope we don't have to do that very often.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
When we have to do it, we have to do it when a user process runs away and nobody can stop it. You can be sat waiting a couple of hours something for it to hit an error and then roll back.
Or we're having to log a call with Microsoft to get them to do it.
Yeah, and I think having had some conversations recently with customers, there is still some concern about when you're moving to the cloud, having that lack of control, and these kinds of things just put that back into your remit, don't they, to be able to do it should you need it. And like you say, hopefully not very often, but if you can do it instantly rather than having to wait a few hours, then that can make a big difference, and it just makes particularly, that maybe the more traditional IT people feel a little bit more comfortable that they've got that in their locker should they need it.
Talking about multiple production environments, more countries supported. So Myanmar, Puerto Rico, Chile, Argentina. No disrespect to any of those, but we are filling out the list nicely now. Slovakia, Ukraine, Bulgaria. That there's you kind of get into a list where you kind of expect the country to be on the list rather than off the list, which is great to see. I think it just shows how far this product has come from kind of the 2 or 3 countries it started with in 2017.
I think in 2021, with those 10 they've added now, I think there's about 13 or 14 last time. That's quite a big increase in the territories that are available to take business.
You've got more and more partners in more and more countries going, we need this, and in a lot of instances creating those localizations, I think. So as more and more have done it, others are finding it easier, and there's a template to follow and all the rest of it. So I just think we're gonna be in a situation where we have pretty much global.
Especially with the growth of Azure, that you're going to get more and more of these available in different SaaS territories as well, rather than just having their localization. They'll be available in the cloud. And that's, again, a great benefit to most of those countries.
So development list, lots of different things. Force sync of customer-specific extensions in online environments. On occasion, that has caused issues where there's a mistake made and you're trying to overwrite the schema, and you could do that on premise, but you couldn't do it on an online environment. So that's useful if something's been done. An AL API for sharing files in Microsoft 365. I think every partner has had its own library, but with all of the authentication changes which are coming with the deadline of next year, hopefully, that one will address those authentications and give us an easy way to save a file into SharePoint or whatever you want to do with it, which will be really useful. AL performance with the snapshot debugger, so profiling to be able to capture performance issues. Again, better tool set. I think there's, again, they're just incrementally pushing the boundaries forward, and
again, it gives just a little bit more control, a little bit more ability to see what's going on rather than having to rely on Microsoft to tell us.
I guess if you're at Microsoft, you get frustrated because they solve one set of requests, and we immediately come back with, now we need this. But they are providing a lot of those. So
it allows a certain amount of self-service as well. So
yes.
Well, that's it.
Better for Microsoft.
Reduce their support questions considerably.
I mean, I thought it was interesting. You mentioned a suggestion that you'd come from. Many of these improvements have come from feedback from partners or end users that actually are getting upvoted to becoming the product. Within 12 months. I think that's quite great when you think as a customer you've got that power, that if enough people are voting for that, it will appear in the product.
So it's worth doing. It's worth putting them out there. It's worth trying to drum up some votes to try and get it, because they are coming. They're coming thick and fast.
I mean, the BC Ideas site, if you go on it now, they don't take the old ones off. They're done. So actually, you're probably looking at there's as many done as outstanding.
So you can go and put your Clipper request on there. So how many votes you can get.
I'll be on it.
But again, you look at it, and if you get votes into 3 figures, pretty much you're up there, and you've got a very good chance of getting it done. I don't think they actually look at where those votes come from either. So if you get everybody in your organisation,
your dad,
my
cousin,
sign your kids up with a Microsoft account and get them to vote, because it does seem that that's a way of getting action, providing it's a valid request. Some of them you see, we're not doing this because this is the alternative way we've done it, but if it's valid, it gets considered, which is great.
But there's a few things on this list that are lots of little things grouped together. So performance improvements, usability improvements, and they'll have all come from little requests that have passed through.
The usability stuff. There's one which really bugs me. Is when you're a kind of experienced old nav user like me, old as age and how long I've spent with it, going down a list and using F8 and copying the field above and doing that really quickly, kind of bang, 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 bang. It just doesn't do it in SAS. There's like about a second.
To wait for the previous line to change before the F8.
You get the little arrow up here, then
and
that's going to be sorted apparently in this version. Which is
unhindered data entry across rows.
Yeah,
I think that counts that as, and performance improvements in the Business Central web client. I mean,
it's pretty quick anyway.
The web client is not bad, is it?
And all the time it's getting better, isn't it?
I mean,
you're using it now, Liz.
Yes, I am, actually.
Or when I have to go back to the Windows client now, I hate it. I hate it.
I was doing a session today with one of our sales guys, and he was looking at an old system, and he was just like, "Oh, how'd you do that again?" It's like, "So how'd you change profiles?" "Oh yeah, you have to go into user personalization and log out, log back in again." It was just like horrible.
One of our new academy programmers giving a support call to look at on 2009. I think his words were, "It's blowing my mind." I didn't quite work out what was going on.
Yeah, I think we because they're incremental changes, we don't kind of realise how far it's come. But the web client particularly, I think when it was first introduced in, what was it, 2009 R2 or something, one of those, wasn't it? 2013.
Yeah, it was just.
It was kind of, ooh, this is clunky.
Even up until fairly recently, if you were an existing user, it was challenging to make.
I mean, most came in BC 15.
If you were
your only
new
choice.
Users, it was
BC
better.
14, it was usual.
For new users, but for existing users, it could still have been a bit of a challenge, and we've still got lots of customers on BC 14 that are still using the old client, not the web client. Yeah. That's a new challenge.
See, some of them are coming into preview almost immediately, aren't they? Some of the development features, public preview from August. I think some of the links to Microsoft 365 also are coming in immediately, but then we'll get a better view of some of these as we get close to release.
And you may get some things which get delayed a month or two. You may get new features that come in but get delayed a month or two. But yeah, generally, I mean, most of them will hit October, but sometimes you tend to see some which straggle there for a month or two.
You saw it with the spring release, the Wave 1 release, where actually it was CU3, I think, where quite a lot hit, which technically was, April, May, June. So it's 3 months in. Microsoft seemed to take a policy of a conservative approach of making sure it's as right as it can be before they go big on it. You can't argue with that, really. I'd rather have it late and
Not
right.
with the automated updates. You can't be pushing things through that are just going to cause lots of issues for customers that are already live.
Be interesting to see how many of the feature enhancements are in feature management as well. So, you can turn them on when you want them. Mm-hmm. That's a really nice facility to have, I think. But I'm not sure how many users understand feature management is there and are going and actually adopting stuff before actually it just turns on by default. Because technically, you look at the features that are in there, you've got 12, 18 months tops to adopt. New pricing is one. Yeah. New pricing was introduced last October, I think. Yeah. And so, it's coming round to it's going to be mandatory before too long. I hope some people are turning it on.
And trying it.
One of the things I've fed back is that I think, from a certain point for new installations, it should be on by default so that in effect you don't set up. Why the hell would you set up using the old way of doing it? Only have to change very quickly. So, and actually the new pricing, the more you work with it, the more you realise actually it's much better. Much more flexible, much more logical.
Yeah, and I think being able to set up a price list is what people kind of expect, really.
And version control that price list, so which one comes into effect on which date. It's the way it should be. Discounts and prices on the same sheet. Finally.
Yeah, why wouldn't you? If it's there, use it now.
Yes, absolutely. So that's, I think every user out there should go and look at feature management regularly and go, actually, this month we're going to turn this on, rather than perhaps wait for it to all hit in a big bang.
Okay, any more?
Couple of bits, integration. So the Dataverse integration, into CRM typically. There's always been a challenge when one of those products doesn't go live at the same time. So rather than going big bang on both, that you introduce CRM later, which is fairly typical, that to link the records through has either been a manual process one at a time, or we've had to write something. But now there's a tool there to do it, to link records on bulk, which I think is good.
Yeah, very good. Show reports from named and shared Power BI workspaces in Business Central. I think that's just a logical little change that's going to make it significantly easier to understand and set up your Power BI shows the way you want them.
You've also got, this is one, again, a feature that was in older versions, that when you're going to run a report, you can actually get the data set that sat behind the report extracted into Excel.
Okay.
So typically if you're debugging a report, or you want to try and understand what's going on with it, you can just push it all into Excel and just see the raw data that's forming that report.
This total's not right.
Yeah. And the last one I've got is if you're calling OData, so from external system, you can pass it the read-only intent. So SaaS environments have a kind of like mirrored version of the database, and if you pass a call for the data with read-only intent, it points it to the kind of copy database, so it doesn't affect your live database performance. So that's a really nice feature.
Fantastic.
But yeah, that's on my list.
So it'll be interesting to see what they add to this list at the last minute. They've done that consistently. There's obviously something gets finished that they perhaps weren't sure was going to make it or not make it for this release, and they'll shove it on the list at the last minute. But so we'll need to do another one of these
with the actual
in October to say this has actually arrived, or it's maybe Service Pack 3 or CU3, as we said.
Well, they get release windows now, don't we? So they don't just release on the day. As you say, it's over the next 2 or 3 months when this is shipping. But
yeah, you seem to be able to spin up what seems to happen is on the day you're able to spin up a BC 19 on the 1st of October. So if you create a new instance, it can always be the latest instance. But upgrades of existing tenants seem to be quite a few weeks later. And quite often you'll see that, they'll start maybe rolling that out in Australia, and then they'll hit a problem, and so they'll suspend it, and then it'll come back a couple of days later. You'll get America being upgraded and so on. I don't know why, whether it's Australia, America, Europe, or whether that's the normal order, but it's quite interesting when you've got notification from tenants around the world. You see that happen, start and stop, and then eventually they seem to get to the bulk, Europe, and it blows out across UK, for instance.
When we did the Wave 1 releases, in terms of those SaaS upgrades now that are happening, they all went relatively pain-free. Did we learn anything from those that we'll look at in from October, or?
I don't think there's an awful lot to learn. I mean, the fear when SaaS was coming along was what the breaking changes would be, how much you'd have to update your customizations. I think the major one came through for BC18, and I think we had 6 different extensions on different clients that we had to go and look at to update them to make them work. So 6 failures out of how many thousands of extensions have we got out there now? It's got to be in 4 figures, right?
Yeah.
And so, they're doing a good job by and large of keeping the breaking changes to a minimum. Now, as time goes on, you've got this thing called obsolescence. If they're replacing something like pricing we just talked about, right? If your customization is to the existing pricing, you're now getting notifications that pricing, the pricing tables that you were looking at, are now obsolete. But that's not that's not a breaking change. So your upgrade won't fail on that because it's notification that it is obsolete. So that's where your partner really needs to pick up on, hang on, this is a changing prospect, and start discussing with you, right, pricing's changing, how, are we just going to upgrade what you've got? How do we engineer that into the new pricing? So that actually when the new pricing becomes mandatory in, I think it's spring next year, wave 1 next year, you're not suddenly faced with like 30, 60, 90 days maximum to get that updated and engineered in. That's something that as things have been marked as obsolete for longer and longer, we'll start reaching the end of those obsolescence periods, and we'll see the number of failures go up probably. But if we're ahead of the game and on the ball, we'll pick them up and go back to the clients and work with them, give them plenty of time to adapt to those changes.
I don't remember there being like a sense of nervousness around the office in the spring with the spring releases. Those fears from a few years ago that I hope everything goes all right.
The cupboard door come in one morning and
yeah. I mean, I know obviously they've changed the way it works now and the way the speed it rolls out in terms of you've got some ability to have a bit of control over that. But I don't remember there was nothing that, I know I'm not in the heart of it like probably Liz in her team are. But
we'll put you on the notification list for the whether they've succeeded or failed, Liam. And the biggest thing I notice is that my inbox goes nuts, because you get an email for every single one of those tenants and every production, sandbox, all the rest of it. You get one saying that we're going to update it, and typically another one saying this is successfully, it's now on this release, and that's for us with the SaaS tenants we've got. That's a hell of a lot of emails now. So
and only getting bigger.
Fortunately, inbox rules in Outlook are your friend in that situation. But yeah, it's making sure you've got those notifications set. If you're using SaaS, you really should make sure those are set up and be on top of it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think in the 10 months of doing the podcast, the number one show that's gone out in terms of listens has been the Wave 1 release. So obviously people find this type of topic really useful. So I'm hoping that'll be the same after today's episode. But thank you for all you guys contributing to that. It's great to have everybody back in the room and doing this together. I'm sure this is the standard way of doing it now. But it's been great to have a chat.
We'll get the previews out and perhaps drill into some more detail about some of these once we have a chance to look at them in detail.
Super. Okay. Well, thanks, guys. And thank you for joining us again on this edition of Tecman Talks Dynamics. And we'll see you again pretty soon. Thank you.